Welcome into the Thunder basketball universe. We are back in Oklahoma City, back inside of our studio after what felt like an eternity on the road. 9 days, 4 different cities, a trek through the Eastern Conference. It was a very cold trip, but we are finally back home in Oklahoma City. So we had to bring you a podcast and bring in a good friend of ours, a friend of the show at this point, Matt Pinto, the radio voice for the Oklahoma City Thunder, a veteran, and he's going to help us recap this entire road trip. But before that, we have to talk about the biggest news of last week, and that was that our very own veteran play-by-play voice, Matt Pinto, was named the National Sports Media Association Oklahoma Sports Broadcaster of the Year. Round of applause for Matt Pinto.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks.
deserving.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to know where you were when you heard you won the award and what your response was.
Well, I got a call in the middle of the game against the Celtics a week ago Sunday, I guess, from the executive director of the organization. And so I'm thinking, well, I can't pick the call up right now. I'll get back to him after the game.
It's very important.
But I'm thinking it's something, like he wouldn't be calling me directly. And so when we finally connected, it was probably a couple of hours after the game. Sure enough, like he acknowledged, congratulations, you're the 24 Oklahoma Sportscaster of the Year. And so I was blown away. I was telling you before we went on, Nick, I didn't even know I was nominated.
Yeah.
So, to hear, and it just, it comes out of left field. And I honestly have never been like a real comparative sort of person in our industry because I think it's kind of an acquired taste in terms of there's perspective as to what people enjoy, what they don't enjoy. But continuing to grind away and stay passionate about what I do, it's nice that there's some level of acknowledgement, but I'm honored and really humbled, honestly, to have received this.
Yeah, well, how fitting and special that you're in the middle of calling that game against
Right?
the Celtics. Such a special environment, and it's happening. And I'm sure, there was this small part of you that had the urge to be like, maybe I'll just pick up and be on the air and just, deliver a couple plays of play-by-play to him while you're on the air.
Well, the thing that was funny, Dave Gorin is his name, and he said, yeah, and you guys won. So this is a big night for you across the board. Yeah, but I have to say that, to me, and you guys may echo this, we are employed. We have opportunities to work for the greatest organization in the NBA. And I'm supported by an extraordinary flagship radio outlet in the Sports Animal in OKC. So to have opportunities to contribute in that sort of environment on both counts is really as much what this is about as anything else, honestly.
Yeah, people are provided great opportunities to succeed here. And you obviously have made the most of them, not just this year, but over the course of your long storied career.
Yeah, well, you have such a tenure, not just with the Thunder, but in the NBA in general. This is 35 seasons this year for you in the NBA, 17 with the Thunder. So you've become a very well-known voice around Oklahoma City and Oklahoma in general. I want to know, with all of that history in your mind, you were just a walking encyclopedia, I feel like, at this point. I can ask you anything, and you know just about anything. Do you have any memory that stands out during your time with the Thunder of just moments that made you speechless, or just moments that stick out to you?
The one that stands out honestly more than any other is when Jeff Green came out of the tunnel, the first home playoff game against the Lakers in their second season here, and he had eyes bigger than my head, looking around like everybody was in their seats, standing, applauding. This is like 25 minutes before the game starts.
Wow.
So it was extraordinary. The electricity in that building from the outset before the tip even was up. And then Westbrook threw down a dunk in the third quarter to let the Lakers know we're not going quietly into the night. They were down 0-2 in the series. That was a resounding, exclamation point, and they fought all the way back, gave themselves a chance to win Game 6 and force a Game 7. So, but just the electricity in the building at what is now Paycom Center, and to see the players' reactions, they were like kids at Christmas. They were just like looking around in the stands like, what is going on? And it had sent chills down everybody's spine who experienced it. And the players were just so appreciative. And after the series ended, Game 6, Pau Gasol tips in a free throw miss. The Lakers win by 1 or 2 in Game 6 in the building in Oklahoma City. Fans wouldn't leave. And the players came back out, and there was just this adoration and appreciation poured down on them. I've never experienced anything like that in my 35 years in the league.
What I wanted to ask you is, this award technically for the 2024 season, based on what you all just heard right there, Matt would have been worthy to win this award every single season that he's been with the Thunder. But I do wonder, calendar year 2024, you had so many different experiences yourself, even stepping in and calling TV play-by-play, which you've done many times before. But you had that experience, and then run to the playoffs, and now we had NBA Cup games, and So I just wonder, maybe what stood out to you as a moment that you got to call in the calendar year 2024.
I don't know that it's a moment, Nick, as much as it was like a dream season. I mean, there were no injuries for the most part. The team, as young as it was, far and away the youngest in the NBA, integrating Chet, the talent that he was, it was almost seamless. It was just extraordinary. All of a sudden, they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games over 500, and they're believing in themselves, and they're delivering in harsh, like challenging circumstances and difficult circumstances, and yet, they're in it all the way. Mark Daigneault was masterful in the way I thought he kind of embedded belief in them, and they bought fully in. And before you know it, they're fighting for the 1 seed, and ultimately, the last day of the season, they get the 1 seed. Historic in nature. So it was, I think, more about the collective last season than anything else. But to go through a season virtually injury-free, we see this season how rare and unusual that is. And yet the guys this season, they don't mind. They don't care. They're all about it.
And that was going to be my follow-up question. Given the context of last season and obviously all that you know about the Thunder and the organization up to this point, what stands out about this season and what we've seen from Oklahoma State? It's the first time we've had you on the pod this season, so we have to get your thoughts on the year so far.
Well, I mean, I just look at the NBA Cup in-season tournament is new.
Yeah.
But I know that every team that's gotten to the finals has been damaged for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks in terms of the effort they're giving and the focus they bring. This team doesn't miss a beat.
Yeah.
I mean, they lose to Milwaukee in the Cup final after being in Vegas for 6 days. It felt like 6 weeks.
Which
honestly.
is an eternity.
We were all there.
No, it's an eternity.
Yeah, and so they didn't play well that game. The second half was not them for whatever reason. And yet, after a cross-country trip the next day to Orlando, beat Orlando 2 nights after, then in a back-to-back go down to Miami and win, and they've not been headed since. It's extraordinary. It belies any sort of logic. This is, again, the youngest team in the NBA, and yet whether they don't know any better or they're just so committed to the standard they hold themselves to, whichever it is, maybe it's a combination of both, it's really working. And again, there's something, Mike Breen pulled me aside when the Knicks were here last Friday and basically said, there's a sense of something special going on with this team this season. And there really is. Yeah. And I have some context to it, having been through the different experiences. You guys have some collected now over the years as well. So we'll see where it all goes. I mean, to be 33-6, 39 games in, that just, it's jaw-dropping. It really is.
I'm so glad that you called out that Florida back-to-back. It's something that Paris and I have talked about on the podcast as well. What Shea said after that game in Miami was so stunning to me, to hear a 26-year-old talk like that, saying, we knew that history that you had laid out, recent history, of course, of teams and the way that NBA Cup bothered them coming out of that. And he was like, we were determined, I was determined to not allow that to be our story. Yeah. And to get to the point where these guys are, and I'm not talking about media narratives, but where when they're in control of the own narrative of their own season, that is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I had Casey Wallace on the postgame last night in Philly and asked him, trying to walk the line a little bit. There's a ton of anticipation about tomorrow night against Cleveland. There's just no way around it. They just faced them. There was a lot of national narrative built into that. The TV ratings were outstanding. Highly entertaining game about the game. And he basically said, yeah, there's more in it. We like winning. We want to win. And we want to continue to improve and get better. Yeah. But he didn't even miss a beat. Like, that's the heartbeat of this team. Yeah. So they're not ever thrown off course. And because of that, they give themselves a chance to compete every single game in every circumstance. It's amazing.
Every game carries its own importance, no matter who the opponent is, which is a very impressive thing to see from a group as young as the Thunder this season. All right, you brought up the game last night against Philly. We just got back from a road trip, as we mentioned, and this was a gauntlet of a road trip. Yeah. I mean, not to mention, the Thunder had just come off a really tough game against the Boston Celtics at home. Then you head out on the road, and you go straight into the fire of playing against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And what an entertaining game. To your point, the Thunder, there were 30 lead changes in this game. Neither team led by double figures. I mean, truly a back-and-forth battle. And for just basketball fans in general, that's a game that you have to sit back and just enjoy and appreciate. And I imagine you appreciated it too.
I mean, can you imagine a quarter in which 43 points are scored by one team, 41 by the other?
Right.
That's profoundly high-level execution against, from the Cavaliers standpoint, the best defense in the NBA on every level, the Thunder, and from the Thunder standpoint, on the road, down at halftime, in essence, the Lions' Den. I mean, that crowd in Cleveland, when that team is playing well, is as good as any in the NBA. So just, and Brian Windhorst of ESPN said it after, I don't remember a regular season game in January bringing the level that we saw played for a full quarter. Like, that was just extraordinary.
And of course, there were passionate Thunder and Cavs fans who wanted that outcome to go a certain way. But I just know that there were hundreds of thousands, if not, millions of people all over the globe that were watching that game, that by the end of that game just sat back and said, I didn't even care who won. That was just great basketball. I just had so much fun watching basketball.
And I'm going to hop on the soapbox really quickly, because as much as ESPN and lesser TNT are shoving and continuing to push their storylines, their narratives, when you see the TV ratings for that game, it tells you it doesn't matter that the league has not marketed these two teams at the level they probably should have. There is an inclination, there is a buildup that caught fire nationally right after Christmas. So this was a gift to the league, and hopefully the league catches on now and recognizes they need to do their best to prop these two teams up. They play the right way. They play exciting basketball. They bring it every night. I mean, this is what NBA basketball should be about.
And there was just so much balanced scoring in that game, too. If you remember, I think Cleveland had like 6 or 7 guys in double figures. The Thunder, obviously Shea had an incredible night, but everybody got involved. And that's just high quality, good basketball. And I know everybody that was watching it appreciated it. Now, the Thunder fell short in that game. However, they fly out to New York and take on the Knicks and just completely dismantled the Knicks inside of MSG. That was incredibly impressive.
It was, and that's almost like the home away from home for the Thunder. I mean, they won 7 straight times there.
It's amazing.
They love playing in that building. Right. They always play well, and it's like,
and they had just played the Knicks a few days, about a week before that game.
Much tougher game. The Knicks had the Thunder under their thumb through like 2.5 quarters in that game, and OKC recovered with that relentless defense. The Knicks are unique in that Tom Thibodeau plays his starters into the ground, and so I think when you bring physicality and you play the full 48 minutes that way, they have a tendency to wear down. Their bench is not developed as yet, but that game in New York, there was never a doubt. The Thunder came out from the outset and laid the groundwork defensively, held the Knicks to 6 points through 6 minutes. They scored only 6 themselves, but once they began to make shots, they didn't miss shots. They made 16 of 17 shots at one point in that first half to kind of push it out to a 27-point lead at halftime.
Well, and you mentioned developing the bench. It sure does help when you can get a guy in Isaiah Joe to come off the bench and hit 8 threes in a game. I mean, that is an ace up the sleeve there that the Thunder has, and it's not always Isaiah Joe. Sometimes it's Aaron Wiggins. Sometimes it's Kenrich Williams coming in and giving this brilliant 7-minute performance in the first half or the second half. You just never know what card is going to be up OKC's sleeve.
You live it every night when you're surrounded by the mob and you're toweled over the head and over the shoulders like last night in Philly. But what I love about how this team is so unified and together in those moments is they were truly grateful for Isaiah Joe. Because finally the lid came off of the basket for one of the best shooters in the NBA, and they appreciate everything else he does, the work ethic he brings. But to celebrate with him at the volume they did in the aftermath of that game, I think speaks volumes about this team and how connected they are.
Well, they had never lost confidence in him to begin with, which says a lot about the group and their connectedness and how much they trust each other. They were still hunting Isaiah Joe throughout the season. Let's not forget, he's an incredibly elite shooter. So even though he wasn't shooting up to his standard of how he normally shoots, he was still shooting the ball particularly well this season. And this group still appreciated what he brought to the table and continued to hunt
and
for
last night draws 2 charges. So it's the other things he does. They recognize and appreciate that. And Isaiah has said, he's told you, Nick, I know, and I've heard him say it a number of times, look, we're so good defensively, I better bring it defensively, or else I'm going to be embarrassed by the effort
a liability,
going on around me.
I couldn't believe it as I was going through the play-by-play last night. He drew 4 offensive fouls in the game. So the 2 charges, but then 2 other offensive fouls that he drew. I mean, that's 4 possessions that he's stealing right there without even flicking his wrist on a shot.
And can we also talk about the fact one of the charges is last night in Philly, one of the charges he drew was on Adem Bona, which is Philly's big rookie center. Like the man is like basically 6'10", maybe close to 7 feet tall. And Isaiah Joe is not the tallest guy out there, not the biggest guy out there, stepping in front of him and taking a charge. Just fearless.
How about when that happened, which was like with 30 seconds left in the game in a 15,
Right.
16-point
You're
game.
so right.
Yeah.
You're so right. Yeah.
They know the one standard. They play to it all the time.
Yeah. Exactly. So sent a message. And so we talk about the Knicks game. Then the Thunder goes out to Washington. Now, the Wizards, a very different team than the Thunder played the previous 3 games, right? They're bottom of the Eastern Conference. They have really struggled this season. And the Thunder took care of business. I mean, did not blink, didn't bat an eye. Every single player got into the game, contributed and scored. Every single player was positive in the plus minus. I mean, truly a business-like approach in DC.
136-95, a 41-point win, because they don't play the scoreboard. It's like they're playing
Right.
possession. It's extraordinary maturity and focus on the part of this team, regardless of what the standings say, what the other team's record says. But I thought that game amplified to me what I've seen all season. It's been incredibly impressive. They identify the top 1 or 2 offensive sources for the opposition, and they really zero in and put them between their crosshairs. That night it was Jordan Poole. And Jordan Poole got nothing done.
Nothing.
And once the lifeblood of the opposing team is sucked away, all of a sudden they're left to sort of meander and figure things out on the fly. That's difficult to do. Thunder did it again last night with Kelly Oubre. With the other guys down in Philadelphia, Oubre never became a factor offensively. And that's an extraordinary level of preparation on the coaching staff's part, and then a willingness to execute on the part of the players.
We mentioned second-year guard Kaysen Wallace a little bit ago, and Kaysen factored massively in that defense on Jordan Poole in Washington. And it made me think of that whole game, made me think of something he said to me last year when he was a rookie. And the fact that he had this perspective as a 19-year-old or whatever he was fascinating to me. He said, we don't play the score on the scoreboard. We play the minutes on the clock. And what he meant by that is, we play to our standard until that buzzer sounds, and then it's time to go and mess with each other and go back in the locker room and get ready for the next game. And I just thought that was incredible maturity. And once again, he picks up another game of 2+ steals, knocks down a couple more threes. In the month of January, he's shooting like 40% from 3. And so Kaysen Wallace is picking up really where he was last year after, again, some growing and changing. This, as Sam Presti always talks about, every new season means that there's a new batch of players on the team, even if those players are returning, because all of these guys are developing and changing, and parts all have to fit together in different ways.
And I think to manage that the way Mark Daigneault and the coaching staff do, it takes a knack. It takes a level of commitment and rigor, and they don't deviate from it, because Mark, all the time when he's asked by media like last night in Philadelphia, the room is full, that's the Northeast, that's where a lot of big voices nationally live and are going to squawk about whatever it is they choose to squawk about. Mark's explaining, we're not about like the present. This is about continuing to grow what these players are.
Right.
Like, it's not a finished version right now. We recognize that. We're all in this together along those lines. And as we grow, obviously our ability to succeed grows. But he doesn't deviate from that. And when he explains that to, I think, national voices, they get a better appreciation for what's going on in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and none of these guys are finished products, as Coach Daigneault likes to say. And all of them have a very significant runway ahead of them to still continue to grow and get better. And they're using each of these games to do just that. All right, we've talked about the Philly game a little bit. I want to dive into it just a little bit more, because this game did not have Tyrese Maxey. It did not have Paul George. It did not have Joel Embiid. And so, obviously, Philly playing at a significant deficit. And the Thunder, they got up by as many as 21 points in this game. However, Philly, in all of their, hustle and their scrap, they cut the game to 4 points in the fourth quarter. So this became an actual ball game. And the Thunder had, I imagine there was some road-weary legs in there too. The flight home started to look really good there in the fourth quarter. And so they really had to adjust and course correct. And adjust they did. The Thunder walk out of there with a double-digit win.
Yeah, it's like, okay, another challenge. Great, bring it on.
Yeah.
And that's how they responded in the fourth quarter, because they did it at both ends of the court. Suddenly the shots the Sixers were getting were a lot more difficult than they had been for about a quarter and a half. And on the offensive end, OKC began to register again the movement, the player and ball and screens and Shea getting to the rim seemingly at will. And they distanced themselves from the Sixers to make certain this game truly was never in doubt.
Right.
And I think human nature is not only the flight home, Paris, but what's waiting for you at home. Another matchup with Cleveland
Great
tomorrow
point.
night. You know,
Great point.
So I think to feel like they're not human and don't understand all of that would be naive.
The player that demonstrated great poise and composure to me in that critical moment of game pressure when the lead did get cut down to 4 was Jalen Williams.
Mm-hmm.
He hit a massive 3 to push that lead back out to 7. And I asked him after the game, what are those moments like? Have you always had this type of poise and composure? He said, actually, a lot of it comes from his military background as a family. His parents both serving in the military and sort of having that even-keeled mentality and approach. But the other fascinating thing he said to me, Matt, was those moments when that game pressure is delivered to you, not necessarily in the final minute of the game, but that's a chance to win the game with 6 or 7 minutes left in the game, which is a little different. He said that's where you actually can get better the most. That's where you can really learn how to improve. That's where you really get tested in a way that as you look at the game the next day, you realize, okay, that was a step forward for us.
Yeah, that game was very impressive for a multitude of reasons. And the guys that step up, guys like Jalen Williams, guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then the Thunder's second unit has just been phenomenal, especially throughout this road trip, just really giving the Thunder an extra lift and an extra boost when they need it, when they're in enemy territory. Which brings us to today. The Thunder is home, not for long, very short time, but a good time, because you're going to go up against the Cleveland Cavaliers. A rematch. This is going to be such a fun game because as we know about OKC, and Matt, you and I have talked about this group does such a good job of adjusting after getting an experience. They learn about it, that this group is really hungry to make sure that they've put their best foot forward and throw a punch against the Cavs.
And my hunch is Alex Caruso's presence is significant in this game. The Thunder had a tough time of keeping and containing the interior against the Cavaliers. Their tandem of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, to their credit, played phenomenally well the first time around. I think Caruso can be disruptive enough, along with the other bigs and the way the Thunder scheme this game, to give the Thunder a different look on the interior that I think is going to give the Cavaliers some problems to at least stop and take a look at, okay, this is different. How do we now adapt and adjust to it? So I expect that this will be a game that will favor the home team because the crowd's going to be on its head like it always is at Paycom Center. Loud City is going to be as loud as ever. And I think the Thunder will be geared in almost a playoff-like fashion to get back after the Cavs.
And it'll be fascinating to see how the Thunder adjusts, if at all, to that high pick and roll and the big-to-big passing between Allen and Mobley. And to your point, with Caruso, one of the things that has always stood out about him is his off-ball positioning defensively, the way he stunts. And Paris is a former player. I just wonder what stands out to you about the way that he can impact things just with where he is on the floor and kind of how he plays mind games with teams.
It kind of makes you see ghosts out there on the offensive side of the floor because Alex Caruso, he's got great length, he's got great size and high IQ. He's able to pick off those passes, but his ability to just kind of like make you hesitate and rethink that decision to pass the ball inside or rethink that decision to drive to the rim, that can have you seeing 6 defensive players out there on the floor, which is such a massive advantage.
I've never used the term savant as it relates to a player, but defensively, to me, he's a savant. Like I can't. It's difficult to comprehend the level at which he sees the game and sees things unfold, plays ahead, and when he understands the structure of what the opposition's trying to do, he's in places that, as you said, they feel like they're seeing ghosts. They're seeing additional players, and they throw the ball right to him on occasion. But it's not just that. It's his quick hands. It's his ability to understand angles and to cut things off and to make teams hesitate out of the flow of what they're doing. And for the Thunder, look, it's the first time all season that I recall they never got full traction defensively against that opponent. And this is going to be interesting to see if they can generate and manifest that in this rematch.
I'm really excited to see this matchup for so many reasons, but the addition of Alex Caruso into the lineup really adds a different element to this game that should be really interesting to watch. Well, that starts a back-to-back for the Thunder.
Of course.
A home road back-to-back, because the night after that game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Thunder getting on a flight and heading out to Dallas to face off against the Mavs for the 3rd time this season. And so the game against the Cavs, that's going to be on TNT. Our FanDuel Sports Network broadcast will be back on the following day on Friday out in Dallas. And that'll be a really interesting game too. Out in Dallas, no Luka Doncic at that point, but it'll be the third time that these teams have met. So a lot of familiarity between these two groups.
And when they played without Luka here, the Mavericks had flow offensively, scored 121, got PJ Washington going in the post, and then from the corner. And the Thunder had a rough time. They were kind of tracking behind the ball in that game, gave themselves a chance miraculously with an extraordinary comeback and nearly pulled it out, but they wound up losing 121-119. So again, I think that the collected memories and applying the learning from those memories is going to show itself in that game in Dallas Friday.
Only Matt Pinto would remember the exact score of a game that happened 6 weeks ago.
And that's why he is the Oklahoma sports broadcaster
exactly
of 2024. And we are
it's an illness, folks. It's an illness.
And we are so grateful that you took some time out of your day to join us on the podcast. It's always so fun when we have you here.
Great to be here.
In the studio. Thanks for joining us, Matt. All right, well, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to tune in to the Sports Animal to listen to our guy, Matt Pinto, on the radio for these upcoming games. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time.
A lot of Matts around here.
Thunder up and catch you later.